Brilliant. Well, today on 12 Yards Out, I've replaced the trophy in the background for this episode, very specially because we're joined by the man who actually gave me it, Mr. Craig Brown. Craig, how are you?
Hi, fine, thanks. Good evening, folks.
It's been 10 years or so. If you remember the first time we met, then I'll be absolutely stunned, to be fair. But, I mean, this is how that came into my existence through your game.
I wondered why it was there, but it's looking well.
Well, we've replaced it for it's a slightly smaller version of the one that's usually there, but we move on anyway. Here, obviously, Craig's been a Scottish football legend. He's done everything there is to do in Scottish football, more or less. Scotland manager for many years. Brief spell as a player at some of the biggest clubs and also a manager at some of the biggest clubs. We're going to recap all that in this episode today. We'll take you back to sort of start your career and sort of playing football. And what was Craig Brown like as a player?
Well, I started playing not far from you in Motherwell. I started playing at school in Hamilton. Mm-hmm. And I was at St John's Primary School in Hamilton, and we had a school team. So that's going back a bit. But then I went to the secondary school at Hamilton Academy then, and our main rival was across the water. We would have thought it would have been Dale High School, but it was Our Lady's High School.
All right.
And maybe the reason for that is because a guy with whom I became very friendly and was Billy McNeil. And Billy was the captain of the Our Lady's High School team, and I was captain of the Hamilton Academy school team. And the rivalry was great. We always had games, and we played. You'll know the ground, the Palace ground.
Yep.
It was just across the river from Motherwell when you came into Hamilton, and it was an ash surface, and it was rough, and in the bad weather, these games were horrendous. But so I started playing at school, and I did quite well. I think I was a very good schoolboy player. I think it was all downhill after that.
No,
because Billy and I played. Sorry.
No, I was just about to say, see the Palace grounds. Obviously, when I played there, maybe less than 10 years ago now, I hated the mud parks behind there. It was just an absolute swamp. So I can only imagine what it was like in grass. It must have been horrific.
No, they weren't the best of pitches even way back in my day, but it was a place well renowned for football. I don't know, there must have been about 7 or 8 pitches, and there were games all the time. And into the dressing room, and there's no hot water, and
sometimes there's still no hot water in 2012 when I was last in there. So
sometimes if it was really cold, you had to cut your laces, or the teacher, if it was a school team, had to cut the laces to get them off because your feet were frozen, the boots were frozen. But there were many happy moments down there, particularly in the summertime, and we had some very good games. So I was at school. I played at Hamilton, and I was lucky to get picked along with Billy for the Scottish schoolboys team, and we both played together. So my claim to fame is that I played in the same team as Billy McNeil, and he won the European Cup as a player. And the next year, I played in the same team as another guy who held the European Cup as a manager, and that was Alec Ferguson. So 2 years in a row, I was in the Scotland under-18 team. And the first year I was there, Billy was in it. He was too old. The next year, I was still age, and Alec Ferguson came in. So I think my claim to fame is I've played with the 2 Scotsmen who have held the European Cup up. One is a player, first ever British team to win it, Celtic, and the other is the manager, Alec Ferguson. So, and I think when you play at school with guys, you retain the friendship. So I've always retained the friendship with Billy until he passed away, unfortunately. And in fact, Billy got me the job at Clyde because he was the Clyde manager and recommended me. And then Alec Ferguson, I played with Alec, and I'm still friendly, name dropping now. Still friendly with Alec. I've got to remember to call him Sir Alec. But, it proves that friendships last if you, I roomed with him as a boy in the Scottish schoolboys team, and when we travelled there, we played only abroad. We went to England, Ireland and Wales. We didn't play beyond that, but that was an abroad game down to London to play England. So I was with Billy, and he was with Alec, and it proves the friendship remains, because when he got the Scotland job, when Jock Stein died, and to take the team to Mexico, I got a phone call from him asking me to join the staff. Now, that was amazing, because I was only the manager of Clyde. I wasn't a Premier League manager. And yet, here was the Scotland manager, Alec Ferguson, writing me. So I think that was a feather in my cap. I was really so delighted, and I took off my work to go to Mexico.
Not bad. It was a school teaching you did, wasn't it?
Yes, I was teaching. I was a lecturer at the college in Ayr at the time. I was lecturing in education at Ayr at Craigie College, and I had to ask. I got a phone call. It's quite an interesting phone call, because I was in a class, and the secretary from the office came along and says, "There's a man phoning you," and he said you have to phone him back. And he says he's Alec Ferguson, and I thought, this is Mccoy winding me up. So I went along, and she gave me the number. It was an Aberdeen number, so I phoned Alec, and he says, "Aye, Brown," they call me Brown. He says, "How would you like the holiday of a lifetime?" I said, "Now, where are we going?" He says, "I have to take the team to Mexico, and I would like you to join me and join the staff." I said, "Oh," I said, "But I've got a job, I can't get away." He says, "Why don't you ask for unpaid leave of absence, and we'll help the payment?" And I said, "Well, I'll do that and see if they'll let me off." And he said, "We've got 3 games to play in Mexico, but we won't let that interfere with our enjoyment." I think maybe the results proved that we enjoyed ourselves, certainly, but we didn't win the 3 games, unfortunately. But I got leave of absence, and that was me introduced to the SFA. So I've a lot to thank the boys at school that I played with, Billy. And then Billy was the Clyde manager. And he got the job at Aberdeen Football Club. And when he went to Aberdeen, because I was friendly with him, he recommended me to Clyde. And I was the assistant manager at Fir Park at Motherwell. And I got the appointment at Clyde because, I think, of Billy McNeill. So I've been very lucky that the 2 of the most illustrious men in Scottish football I got on well with, and they helped my career. So,
not a bad chance meeting, I suppose. Just I was thinking that as well. See, just in terms of football, iconic Scottish football players for Lanark in general, there's so many of them. I didn't realise until you look through sort of who's came from your Mullow, Bells Hills, Hamiltons, just how many of them. You've got guys like yourself, and then there's others from the modern day, like Alan Mccoy and stuff. And it's just, the list is pretty long.
Yeah. The list is long and it's quite varied. The backgrounds of these guys it's quite interesting. It used to be, if you're a good young player and you were 15, you left school and went down to England, and you were like Billy Bremner or someone like that, Dennis Law. They left school and went to England as players. Now they don't do that. They stay and they go to a boys' club maybe, or they go to link with a senior team. So there's a big changeover in the development of players. And I'm a great believer in junior football. And I always say to people, they say, "What about these new schemes that are in the go? We've got Project Brave and things like that." I said, "Look, what was wrong with the boy playing at school, playing with his amateur team, and he might sign for a senior team like Celtic or Motherwell or whoever, and play junior for a year, because 10 of the 11 Lisbon Lions played junior football." Now, there can't be much wrong with that route to senior football. So I played junior football as well, but I didn't play it as well as the Lisbon Lions, obviously. And I played with Wishaw.
There was another team junior as well that I've actually got down, because I used to do, well, up until maybe last year, I did media for them, Newmains United.
For who? Newmains, yes. That was Coltness United.
It was. They went through the names early 2000s, wasn't it?
It became Newmains. And I'll tell you who else played for Coltness United was Tommy Gemmell, Lisbon Lion. So it was not a bad move to play junior football. And in Lanarkshire, Jimmy Johnston at Celtic played for Atlanta Celtic. Billy McNeill played for Atlanta Victoria. So that there was a route to the top of football through the junior grade. But now it's not a favoured route, and I can't understand why.
Now, it's interesting. Like, you're going to speak about this.
And just speaking about the juniors, I mean, have you seen the recent changes with a lot of them jumping into the west of Scotland? Do you think that can help kind of bring the junior game back to its former glories?
Yeah, well, I hope so, because I think the pyramid system's good, and I think if the juniors get into a route into the pyramid system, now Bonnyrigg Rose are now in the Lowland League, and that's in the route through. So I think there is a way, and I think it's a good idea that the juniors get access to, obviously, the big thrill is to get into the Scottish Cup. Well, of course, I'm in Ayrshire at the moment. I've lived in Ayrshire for years, but Auckland, like Talbot, obviously, have regularly recently get into the Scottish Cup, and they've done. They beat Ayr United 2 seasons ago. So junior football, I think, is to be respected, and I think if I had it my way, I would use it more as a route for boys to progress to senior football.
Well, you've even got, like, I know probably the one team that's been hitting the headlines in terms of junior football recently is Darvel. I don't know if you've seen the stuff with them.
Yes.
They've got the big fancy changing room, the very, very good talent that sort of SPFL clubs would like to do. There's a lot of ambition being shown with this sort of new move as well.
Well, Darvel are determined, I think, to get into the senior league.
Yeah.
And they've got a backer now, and I was reading the story about them. I know Darvel's a good football village. They had the famous Cox family that played, Sammy Cox played for Rangers, and he was a legend there. And Jackie Cox, I think, was his cousin. He was a well-known player and manager. So the Cox family from Darvel was well-renowned in football. And it's the village in the valley there, so it'll be tough. I think if they're determined, I think Darvel could be the next big thing in junior football.
Mm-hmm. No, I seen a thing in the paper the day. Was that they're planning to be in the pyramid, like, championship in 10 years. Like,
yeah,
it's just weird. Like how
it doesn't matter how much money you've got. You've got to be a bit more lucky than you get a good manager and good recruitment, and you could have all the money in the world. If you don't get the right staff, you're struggling. So if they get the staff correct, and if they've got a lot of money, they might make the progress right through the leagues, and the pyramid system would suit them. But it's a hard shift. I don't think it'll be easy.
No, definitely. Just to sort of moving on to other bits of your career, one point I've got down is, obviously, I was born in 2001, so my football knowledge spans from about 2006 onwards. Sort of what I was wanting to know, see sort of when you first started in football, sort of back in the 60s, 70s, even 50s, how much has it changed for you since then?
Well, the game's changed quite a lot, and a big change in football. So you're a young lad, and I envy you. Your age, I think I'm the oldest guy in Scottish football now.
I don't know.
I was born in 1940, so that's a bit different from you. I've got 60 years on you, and I loved it playing football at Hamilton and in Lanarkshire as a boy, but the changes are quite unbelievable. And the main change is, of course, the money from Sky, particularly pumped into England. And I work with 3 clubs in England, and I know that the resources are unbelievably lucrative down there. So that, and the salaries, the wages that are getting paid to players, a lot of people describe them as obscene. And I think you should pay them what they're worth or what you can afford. But the biggest change, I think, in my time is that there used to be no substitutes. It used to be 11 players. And if you get injured, you had to limp on and stay on. And there was no way you were coming off. And that made a big change to the game of football. And then, of course, the amount of money going in at the top made a huge change as well. And I'm not saying it's for the worse, but there were good things about the old system, which I think were disappearing. And that was the fact that, you played more for fun then, rather than for money. And now, it's such a you know, and the transfer of players and the agents. That's another new. When I started, you know, as a manager at Clyde Football Club, and even when I was at Motherwell, there were no agents. You never heard of an agent, and players just come in and spoke to you. Their father might come, and then of course now with agents working hard to try and get the best deal for their players. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's a totally different scenario now.
Aye, football very much is a business, I think, more than it was back then. Like even like the one club player type thing. I mean, you probably won't get many of them. I know Celtic have got a couple that could perhaps go on and do that, but on the whole, I think like, even wee things like that, you're just disappearing from the game as it evolves.
Yeah, we think of, you know, I think your Motherwell player, Joe Wark, for example, one club. Joe played all these years with the one club, Motherwell, and of course I mentioned McNeil and Danny McGrain, guys like that. They just played their whole career with Celtic, but now the agent, it's in the agent's interest personally, as well as for his client, the player, to get a move, to get the player a move, because he's going to get his commission. So the agent's phoning around other clubs and saying, "I've got a player for you, and you know I can get him." And they can be very useful, the agents, but they can also be disruptive, and they upset the guy all starry-eyed, the player, his client, and you know say to him, "Leave it to me, I'll get you a big move." And it distracts the boys sometimes. So, you know, there's good and bad in the fact that agents are now quite prevalent in the game. But I think it was fine without them, actually, you know.
I know, it's crazy. Like when we were organising something from this, I'll not name who it was, but it was like you had to go through like 4 or 5 different people just to get to the person you were wanting to like speak to. And it's crazy. Like I always think like players now are treated a lot more like commodities. Like they need to be kept well, and for a reason, whether that's injury or whatnot. It just is that the player is the business.
I think, you know, the players, he's an advisor. No, I think players in the past were ripped off a bit. You know, the very good players were not playing for what they were worth. But it's gone complete full circle. It's gone the other way now. And some bad players are making an awful lot of money. And whereas in the past, some very good players weren't making what they were due. So, I mean, there's good and bad about the agent. A good agent is a great benefit. He's a sensible guy and he keeps his player level-headed. But there are too many that are exploiting the system, and we don't like that.
No. Right. So I wanted to touch a bit on like your primary teaching. Well, you're sort of teaching a bit more as well. See if like Alex Ferguson hadn't of like gave you that ring to go to Mexico. Like, what do you think? Where do you think you'd be just now?
Sorry, I didn't hear that question. Sorry.
Let's see if Alex Ferguson hadn't given you that phone call to go to Mexico, holiday of a lifetime, you'd have still been doing your teaching stuff. Where do you think you?
No, I went back to teaching after a while. I had got a nice job as a lecturer in education at Craigie College in Ayr. So, you know, if Alec hadn't phoned me, I was the Clyde manager at the time, part time, and I was full time working in the college. So I would have kept my job with Clyde, which I did. You know, but when I come back, the SFA got a new manager, and it was Andy Roxburgh. They offered it to Alex Ferguson, and Alex said, "No, I want to stay at club football." He was the Aberdeen manager at the time. He wasn't with Manchester United when we were in Mexico. And I think it's not generally known, but both Arsenal and Tottenham were interested in him when he was in Mexico, because they had to get new managers. But they both went. They didn't wait for Alec coming back from the World Cup. They got a manager each, and Alec went back to Aberdeen. And a few months later, I think it was September, October, he was off to Manchester United. Gordon Strachan recommended them down there, so away went. But it wouldn't have made a big difference to me if I hadn't gone to Mexico. But maybe the fact that I went, and one or two of the committee were there, obviously, the whole committee, the international committee, and they had to get a new manager. Well, they got Andy Roxburgh, whose record with the youth teams was exceptional. And Andy asked me to come as his colleague, as his assistant. And I didn't want to be an assistant. I wanted a team of my own. And I said, no, I want a team. So they said they would give me full sole charge of the under-21 team, which was great. So I had a terrific job. I was assistant to the national team, and I was in charge of the under-21 team. And I had a couple of great colleagues working with the under-21 team. Tommy Craig worked with me, the under-21 team, and I worked with Andy. Now, in those days, this is important because in those days, the fixtures matched. If the international team was playing on a Wednesday night, say in Croatia or in Poland or anywhere, the under-21s were playing the night before. So they all went in the same plane. So I could be in charge of the under-21 team and assistant manager with the national team, which it worked perfectly. But then the UEFA changed the system. And the under-21 tournament's totally different now from the full team tournament, so that the fixtures don't match, so they don't travel together, and therefore I couldn't have done that nowadays. I couldn't have been an assistant with the national team and in charge of the under-21 team. But it worked very tidily for me then, and it was a great, I mean, I had 16 years with the SFA, 8 as the assistant and 8 as the manager, and it was a very tidy time, and we were relatively successful.
And what was the difference between educating a load of youngsters at college compared to like a Scotland national team?
No different. I'm telling you, a Scotland team is, I've often said, you're dealing with millionaires, but they're like first year boys at the school, or even primary 7, they're like primary, because they are there, they want to hear, they want to learn. That's my experience. And people say to me, it must be difficult to deal with these big stars, the millionaire boys. How do you've got a dressing room and it's full of, I was in the dressing room when the best Scottish player ever was in the team, in my opinion, and that's Kenny Dalglish. Now, I wasn't the manager, I was the assistant manager. Andy Rocks was the man, but Kenny was in the team. Now, Billy McNeil had finished, he was away. Dennis Law was away, unfortunately. I'd love to have been with Dennis Law. But I was in the dressing room when Alec McLeish, Willie Miller, Gordon Strachan, these guys, Gally Mccoy, Maurice Jones, David Cooper, all these super players played for Scotland. And, the Paul McStay, a marvellous player as well, Craig Burley. When you think of them all, the mind boggles. Now, there was not a problem with these guys. It was just like when you're speaking to them, it's the same as if you were speaking to a school group. But I never, ever talked to them as if I was a school teacher.
I can imagine how it did.
Well, another thing I did was, when you're in a hotel, and you were playing in a game and you were staying abroad and you get a hotel, and you said, could we have so many rooms for staff, and could we have a dining room of our own if possible? Could we have a meeting room? And they always gave you a meeting room, and I said, we need maybe 25, 26 seats in the meeting room, because there's the players, maybe 20 players in the staff, and every time you're into a meeting room, it was in rows. It was like a school classroom. And I always went in, I said to the physio, I said to the lads, move these chairs, make them random. Don't make the team come in and think they're sitting in a classroom. And I'm a school teacher when I lecture them. So make it so that there'll be a couple of chairs at the side, and we made it a random arrangement. And it was nice and informal. And they came in, and I learned from Alec Ferguson. I was 10 games with Alec with the Scottish team, and I watched everything he did and everything he said. And he never once raised his voice. He never once gave us a hairdryer that they talk about. He was always conversational, like I'm talking to you. This is how he would talk to the team. And he would say, lads, well, if we get a free kick, any ideas? And you get a good one at your club? And he would look round about, and somebody would say, yes, I've got one. Let's hear it then. And it wasn't, I thought, Alec, you'll do this and you'll do that, and they'll jump to attention. It was totally the opposite. It was very informal, nice and relaxed. And he had a very good atmosphere in there. And I said, if I get a job at that level, I'll treat the guys, as colleagues, as friends, and not bully them. Now, obviously, they knew that you were in charge, and if they stepped out of line, they were bombed completely. And the same during game time. But even at half-time in games, he would come in and he would not shout and roar and scream at the team. He would be logical. And I thought, I think that's the way to do it. And hopefully I try to do it that way.
Mm-hmm. I always think with Alex Ferguson is that he always obviously had the ability to go off at players, but I've heard a lot of stories as well of he would defend his players, especially in the press. That it would be like he knew when to go off of them and knew when to sort of like go out and publicly defend them if they'd had a bit of a shocker.
Well, I think one thing about Alec was very, very loyal to players, and as a player he was himself, and he wouldn't allow anybody to abuse a player, in the media or anything like that. And when he would tell them that they weren't doing what he wanted or that it wasn't good enough, but it wasn't aggressive, and I was not disappointed. I was delighted, but I was a wee bit surprised. I was waiting to hear the firebrand, waiting to hear this guy coming in and shouting and roaring at them and swearing at them. But no. And I think, Archie Knox, my colleague, was a colleague of Alec at Aberdeen and at Manchester United. And Archie says, he says, I think I saw the hairdryer maybe twice, when he shouted and he roared at him and he kicked a boot at Beckham and it kind of hit him in the head, But he said that one incident was magnified and made out to be, a real condemnation. But Alec Ferguson is a very intelligent guy. This is what I was saying to you. It used to be you left school, and this is not saying they weren't intelligent, the Billy Bremners and the Dennis Laws, but they left and they went down to England. Alec Ferguson and Billy McNeil and guys, they stayed and got their hires. And they could have, without doubt, Alec Ferguson, I knew better, no problem go to university and get a degree, because he could never beat him at Trivial Pursuit or at any game. His knowledge was terrific, and his American history, for example, one of his.
He got a bit in Glasgow. There's a university. I think it might have been Glasgow University. He got like libraries and stuff named after him as well just recently.
He got what? Sorry.
I think it was a library in Glasgow University. Am I right?
Yes, they call it after him. Yeah, they named it after him. But these guys are highly intelligent, and I think if you're intelligent, it helps you to be good at your job, I think. And arguably the best part-time manager of my time in Scottish football, and the guy that, of a part-time team, was Terry Christie, who was a manager. You're too young to remember him, maybe. But
I remember Terry Christie well.
Well, Terry, you couldn't get a better. Every club he went to was successful and made money. And Terry was a head teacher of 3 secondary schools in Edinburgh. And, he was a manager of Meadowbank, he was a manager of Alloa Athletic, he was the manager of Sennismuir. Now, they were in the top clubs. And I think if he loved Hibernian, if he'd gone to Hibs, he'd have been a huge success, I'm telling you, because he was switched right on. Every team he had was so organised, So I think that his greatest asset was his intelligence. And if you're thinking and you're one thought ahead of the opposition, you've got a great chance, And if the players know that you're no mug, they won't try anything on me, and they wouldn't with Alec Ferguson, they wouldn't with Terry Christie. And, I'm not saying my favourite part-time manager, well, he's now full-time manager, obviously now, is Dick Campbell. Dick is a superstar manager, in my opinion. I would give him the manager of the year every season, because he's so successful wherever he goes. Not only does he make the club money, he improves the league, wherever they are. When he goes, they get better. I'll give you a good story about lads. You'll like this one about Dick Campbell. He was the manager of Partick Thistle,
right,
and the chairman said to him, "Dick, this is getting terrible, because I'm going down Sauchiehall Street in Glasgow, and I can't go down 20 yards, and a guy stops me and says, 'You're the chairman of Thistle.' 'Yeah.' He says, 'That team's rubbish. Your manager's hopeless. You need to get rid of him.' And he says, and the chairman saying to Dick, everywhere I go, and down that street in Glasgow, I get nailed and told, you're hopeless, the team's rubbish, we'll only get rid of you. and Dick says, well, I can solve that, Mr. Chairman. And he says, well, how do you solve that, Dick? He says, don't walk down Sauchiehall Street. I thought that's a good story for me with Stuart Milne at Aberdeen when I was the Aberdeen manager.
Brilliant.
I told Stuart, if you're getting a bit of abuse about me and not being good enough or anything like that, don't go down Union Street in Aberdeen and they won't meet you and nail you. But you know, Dick's sense of humour great, and I think you need it in football. But Terry Christie and Dick Carmel, the two managers I think have done wonders wherever they've been. That's my feeling.
What were you saying before?
I mean, yeah, it just shows with Dick, he's one of those few that have, the kind of the old school managers who've still got a job in Scottish football, because there's been this big shift to younger ex-players, but Dick's still there plodding along.
Aye, Dick's doing really, really well. Dick's a king of Fife, you know. Well, of course, Jim Leishman was another from Fife as well. That seems to be a hotbed of good guys, good managers. Jimmy Nicholl, you know, Fife. Craig Levine came from Cowdenbeath originally. You know, they had a crop of smashing managers in Fife, and Dick. And I don't know, there's something about the Fifer. But,
there's one.
I'm west of Scotland. I prefer the west of Scotland, obviously. I think we're the top, but you know, you've got to give credit where it's due, and Fife has produced one or two good ones.
There's one from that neck of the woods we were speaking to a couple of weeks ago, John Hughes.
Aye,
and
John.
He mentioned you in it. He mentioned you in it when we were speaking to him. He says you and Archie Knox should be running Scottish football.
Really? Well, I'll tell you, Big Yogi's different class. I think, you know, he's a great character and a terrific record as a football manager. And I know that, you know, I know the international players quite well. And John Collins says to me, the best manager he's worked with is Big John Hughes. And he says he should get a job anywhere because of his excellence. Now, John's no fool, and he's been around the game in England and in Scotland and in France. And he loves Big Yogi. You know, I've not worked with Yogi as a manager, but I've been with him at many occasions and on coaching courses and things like that. And you know, I love him, and what he did at Inverness, you know, was quite exceptional. Up there winning the cup, and you know, I've got to say that there's a lot of good guys around, and Yogi's one of them.
It definitely does seem to be that shift. I feel like clubs are now moving towards sort of, especially down south. You've seen it with Arsenal, Arteta, and more prominently probably Chelsea with Frank Lampard. But they're getting guys who have been in and around the club, or perhaps they've retired, gone into the coaching system at the club, and then moved into the manager's job. That seems to be the way a lot of clubs are moving, rather than sort of going on the merry-go-round of managers.
Yeah, it's not proved, you know, generally successful, that route. You know, going from a player right in to become the manager. It's happened in Scotland in one or two. You know, Willie Miller was the manager at Aberdeen for a while, and John Gregg was the manager at Rangers, and Billy McNeil was the manager at Celtic for a while. But I think someone who comes from out with and in with a fresh look at it has maybe got as good a chance as the legend. You know, and Alan Mccoy had a good spell there, you know, in a very difficult period, being the manager of Rangers. Now, if anyone was a favourite amongst the fans and destined for glory, would have been Ali. But he had difficulty, but that was because of the state the club was in, and I think the financial situation, and you know, the chap White that was running it wasn't Ali's best foul, I think. So, you know, I don't think there's a formula for a manager being successful with. But I do think that a guy who has maybe been an assistant to somebody and had started at a lower level, and Alec Ferguson's a perfect example. East Stirling, St Mirren, Aberdeen, and then Manchester United. Now the kind of route you would think ideally to go, and you progress and you learn your trade with East Stirling, and then you do brilliantly with St Mirren. And actually St Mirren sacked, I think. People forget.
I can mind that.
I don't think it was anything to do with his ability, but there was a clash there, but he got sacked. And Aberdeen took him when he was sacked, which was taking a chance, but it was a wonderful appointment. And he did so well. So I don't think there's a royal route to be a manager. You know, some do it from being an assistant, some do it go straight in. You know, we had Jose Mourinho in our courses here in Scotland, and I remember him. Now, Jose and Andreas Boas, his pal from Portugal, they were shy young laddies. You would never in a million years have thought that he was going to win the Champions League. You know, they were quite nervous, they were shy, they were humble, and yet, so I don't think there's a prescription to be a manager. You know, if somebody says, how do you become a manager? I don't know. There are so many routes. One route suits one guy and one club, and another route suits another guy. So, you know, you just don't know. You know, when you think how long Arsene Wenger was at Arsenal, you know, and Arsene Wenger had been sacked in France, and he came over and he was hugely successful at Arsenal. So, as I say, there's no prescription, and I wish I knew it.
Just when you're mentioning Jose Mourinho there, at least in my lifetime, he's been my complete favourite manager. Just in terms of, I think he's a proper good anti-hero in football. I know he's obviously he's struggling now, but I just love the way I think obviously his glory days are behind him, but like, you can't take away what he's done, and I think the way he deals with the press and the way he is I love it.
It's good. I love listening to him. I love his interviews, I've got to say. You know, but when you look at, I was at Motherwell for a while, and I look, when I was at Motherwell, they had the best ever Motherwell team. They had an event at Fir Park, and the best ever Motherwell manager. And you know, it was terrific to see that the McLean family are a great knowledgeable group in football. Tommy McLean got the award from the Motherwell fans as the best ever Motherwell manager. Now, he won the Scottish Cup when he was 10 years the manager. Now, Tommy just came really, he was a player at Kilmarnock and Rangers, and he came to Motherwell as a manager and was very, very successful. So there you can go straight from being the player right in, and of course, probably maybe initially better not with your own club. That's just my feeling. I might be wrong there. But he went to Motherwell and was the best. He got the award from the fans of Motherwell, the best ever Motherwell manager, which he deserved. And now everyone would agree his brother was the best ever Dundee United manager, Jim McLean. And I worked with the third brother at Motherwell, Willie, who was a brilliant manager. I thought, you know, Willie's knowledge and handling the players and everything about him. He didn't have the best players at Motherwell, but he was a very, very good manager. So there's a family from Larkhall, Arskill, and I think the most knowledgeable family in Scottish football in my time in Scotland.
More name drops in this podcast than I think I've had hot dinners at this rate.
Sorry, well I'm talking too much. I'm not answering your question.
On it. Me and James can't sit here and say we've achieved some of the stuff you've achieved in your career. I just find it completely fascinating, like the way you're putting across these names. Obviously, you've spoken about these names before, but like, they ever take in just like how many generations of like prime Scottish talent you've worked with?
How many, sorry?
Like how many, like you've worked with more than a few generations now of like the
generations. I've all these generations. Well, you know, I started. You know, I reckon that. Well, as everyone told me, and I didn't like to hear it, but everybody told me last week I was 80. So I signed professional football when I was 18. So that's 62 years ago, and that's 6 generations I was in professional football in Scotland. And I'm not boasting, I'm just saying it's a fact, you know. And some of the generation I should apologise for, but I enjoyed it and I did my best. And I'm sitting here prepared to admit I'm the luckiest guy in Scottish football because I played with 3 good clubs. I managed 3 good clubs in Scotland. I worked for 3 good clubs in England. So I had a 3-3-3. Played for 3, managed 3, and worked with 3 in England. So I think I've a lot of experience, and I think managed at every level in Scotland, right through the leagues. And then of course I had all these years with the national team, and I worked with the under 18, under 16, under 18 Scotland team, under 21, and the national team. So I'm the luckiest guy in Scottish football by a mile to have had that enjoyable life and enjoyable experience and met so many smashing people in football, and then had still somebody wants to talk to me and in a podcast.
It's weird. It's weird that obviously podcasts have totally just came to the fore, especially in Scottish football. There's so many Scottish football podcasts, and it is really interesting to hear just like how many, especially guys from your generation, just all these stories sort of being passed down to sort of my generation who haven't type of thing before. I think they're very good in that form.
Aye, well, I mean, as you gather, you set me off and asked me a question, and I find myself not really answering it, just telling story after story after story. So you need to get a hold of me and get me on the get me to say what you want answered, rather than allow me just to rabbit on, because I can go on forever.
It's not like John Hughes. We'd ask him, just, I don't know, what was your favourite memories at Hibs, and by the end of it he's talking this time he was at Falkirk training with Russell Lapity and he was doing nutmegs through the wee boy in community training and stuff. It's fine, stories are great. Just sort of going back to sort of the national team stuff, obviously, one thing I think we were speaking to Davy Robertson the other night about it is sort of club over country. How was it when you first went into the full-time Scotland manager role? How was it very much country over club? Because now clubs are it's much more club over country.
Yeah, well, I think, you see, because of the Champions League has become just about as important as international football. I was lucky when I was in the international team. When I was in the international team, there was a European Cup, it was called. It wasn't the Champions League. But you see, European Cup only had 1 club from each country in it. Now, the Champions League, England have got 4 quite often in the Champions League, and it's so much money swimming about in that Champions League that it's become almost, or maybe even more important in many people's eyes than international football. Now, I can't complain, because when I was international team, the international was the ultimate, and that, there was a European Cup and there was a Cup Winners' Cup, but you had 1 club from each country in that, and if the club get put out, that was it. It was dead and gone. They didn't have many leagues, and it was straight knockout. And I was at Dundee. We were in the European Cup, and I've got to get this in. When we won the league,
right?
I've got to get this in. We were in the European Cup, and all you did was you played each team home and away, and it wasn't a league. It wasn't a small section. So Dundee beat Cologne, the German champions, in the first round. Hammered them at Dundee, 8-1. You wouldn't believe that now. The Scottish champions beat the German champions. Then we lost over there in Germany, but won in aggregate. Next round, Sporting Lisbon, Portugal, over to Lisbon and brought them back here, beat them in 2 legs. Next round, Anderlecht of Brussels, the Belgian champions, beat them, hammered them over there 4-1. And with the super player playing for Dundee at the time, Golzin kept scoring the goals. So when you think of it, Dundee into the semi-final of the European Cup, and that was 4 years before Celtic won it. And so Scottish football was at a high then, and the European Cup was the only competitor for the international team. We lost in the semi-final to AC Milan in 2 legs. although it was a close game, very close at Dundee, but lost over there. So do you think that, and then Celtic won it 4 years later in Lisbon, they won the European Cup. So there's been a big swing round in football and in the interest in football, in that the European Cup no longer exists. It's a Champions League, and the money in that is unbelievable. And I don't know why I'm digressing onto this, but you know, we feel, or I felt with international football at times, the international team was playing second fiddle to the Champions League, you know, and I've got to say that I had great cooperation. Celtic and Rangers were in European finals when I was in the job with Scotland. But yeah, I get very good support from both clubs. They weren't holding their players back and saying, "Oh, we've got a European game." You know, Celtic got to Seville, Rangers to, but they were in the final as well. So, you know, the games, I think it's changed a lot, but there are so many fixtures internationally, in other words, European fixtures. And I was a director at Aberdeen for the last 7 years. When I retired, they kindly asked me to stay on as a director. And Aberdeen have been in Europe in the last, I can't think, 7 years. And we've had some very, very good European matches to try to get into the group stages. Not yet, but this year we'll hope to do it.
By the way, they've got close. They've got close on a couple of occasions. Like, there's been a few, especially over the last couple of years, where it's felt like, what if? I think especially last season was what if, because I don't. Who is it to get put out by again?
I'm trying to remember myself. I think we were. Was it last year, the year before? We were unfortunately beaten by would you believe, a Cypriot team. You know, I think, but when I was at Motherwell, and that's 2009-10. 9-10. We were in Europe at Motherwell, and we got to the playoff, which was very good.
I can remember. Still Bucharest.
Sorry, no, it wasn't. So that was the year before that.
So was I.
I think that was the year before, but we played Odense of Denmark, but we had beaten the Icelandic team, Bredo Albik. We'd beaten them. Who else did we play? We won in Norway against Alisson.
I can remember the Alisson one, because at the time Alisson had the world's tallest striker.
That's correct.
It was up against Stephen Craigan. It's the most bizarre sight I've seen at Fir Park. Stephen Craigan's not the biggest back. You know, this big 7'2" giant. I remember the tackling. Wasn't very good, to be fair, but I mean,
no, it was the tallest striker in Europe. You're right. And I remember over there we were playing them, and they had an AstroTurf pitch, which was unusual then. And they were pinking high balls up to. And I was saying to call him Craigs, Stephen Craigan. I said, Craigs, he doesn't get a free header. You go up and bump him and knock him. Well, Archie Knox, my colleague, was getting angry with Stephen because Stephen said, "I'm not going to win this ball." So he didn't jump once or twice. Well, Archie was going, and he was shouting at him, you know. And I said to him at half time, I said, "I'll tell you something. You've got to go up with him and put the elbow on him, nudge him so that he doesn't get a free header. And if he flicks it on, Reynolds will get it. Reynolds is quick." And Reynolds was covering behind. But Archie kind of fell out with Stephen at the half time. I remember that in Alisson because of the big striker that you've got. Yeah, it's good knowledge you've got. You remember the tallest striker in Europe. Now Scotland are about to play Norway. I hope that means they'll beat Israel in the semi-final of the playoff for the European Championship. And if they play the winners of Norway and Serbia, and Norway now have the biggest striker in Europe. I'm trying to remember his name.
Aye, but they've went for the 7'2" Alisland man to Mr. Haaland.
Aye, so we've been there before with Motherwell. So Scotland, I hope, I'm sure, and I'm confident we'll beat Israel in this semi-final that's coming up. Because I saw the last two games. I saw the two games against Israel the last time. But I think I'm quite sure that Israel are there to be beaten. But I'm worried about Serbia and I'm worried about Norway, particularly because of the big striker boy. You know, I think we can get this time. We can qualify.
Like the thing is about the big striker boy is like he's only 19. I think he might even be ages with me. He's like 6'4", built like a brick. It's like he's.
I know. Big,
to be fair, have you watched him, James?
Yeah,
sorry?
aye, fantastic.
Is he? Is he fantastic?
I've been really impressed when I've seen him. I think, as well as you say, it's definitely a team that's set to be beaten. But Norway will be a much, much tougher ask for them.
Thanks, Serbia.
Well, I saw Serbia on television in the last tournament, and they looked excellent. They really they worried me, Serbia. So whatever team wins that game, we have a final, and it's an away game. It's a one-off game. You know, we've got Israel at home in the semi-final for the playoff, and then if we beat them and we play the winner, it's an away game. It's going to be difficult for Scotland, but I still think we can do it.
No, who is? See, just sort of in the current crop of Scotland players, I think we're on the cusp of another very good generation of young Scottish talent. Who are the sort of names that you've been keeping?
Yeah. Well, I'm biased because I'm Aberdeen, you know, and I think, you know, it was unfortunate he got a bad injury, but McKenna is a very, very good player, and believe me, Scott McKenna's fit. Outstanding at centre half. Now they need another centre half. I don't know who they're going to be put in there, but the boy Suter at Hearts was getting a mention, but you know they're going to be in the league below. It's, you know, have to jump from the Championship maybe to if he's picked. But you know, when you look at the calibre, you know, the McGinn in midfield and the fullbacks Roberts, and I saw McBurney play the other night there on television. And I've never seen him in the flesh, apart from when he came on played for Scotland. And I thought, this boy's got a bit about him too, McBurney. And of course, I'm a great Ryan Fraser fan, and I think James Forrest. But McGregor of Celtic, to me, was the best player in Scotland last season. You know, every time I saw him, he was outstanding. So you've got McGregor, you've got McGinn. The midfield looks to be very good for Scotland. And if we get Ryan Fraser on one side and James Forrest on the other side, we've got, and if Lee Griffiths gets back fit and form, you know, he can score a goal. So I'm agreeing with you that I do think that we've got that is a good phrase. I'm learning on the cusp. That was great. I think we are on the cusp of something very good.
You worked with Ryan Fraser during sort of the early stages of his career at Aberdeen. Yes. Is it any surprise to you that obviously I don't know, by the time this is out, he might have a new club, to be fair. But have you been pleasantly surprised by just how well he's done down south?
Well, I'm not. I didn't put him in the first team. He had played in the first team before I went to Aberdeen, and Mark McGee was the manager. And Mark McGee put him in the first team when he was 16. But when I came, he wasn't in the team because he'd been in, but he'd been out again. But when Archie Knox and I saw him, we put him into the team, and he was sensationally good. And we had signed the boy Niall McGinn, and we played Niall McGinn as a striker. And Niall McGinn got 21 goals the first season I was at Aberdeen. And I think Fraser laid on 20 of them. He was just laying it in a plate for Niall McGinn. So when he went to England, he had the second highest number of assists in Scottish football. And when he was at Bournemouth, would you believe, they're not a top team, well, they're not a fashionable team, rather. At Bournemouth, he had the highest number of assists in the Premier League. So that he was laying goals on for Bournemouth, and they laid them on for Aberdeen. So I think, I don't know where he's going to go though. He's on freedom of contract. He's not re-signed for Bournemouth, and right now they could have been doing with him. So he'll be, I think, very good for Scotland if he's get back to a club and he's playing. So you've got him and you've got James Forrest, who's never, in my opinion, watching Celtic as I have done playing Aberdeen, I've never seen Forrest having a bad game. You know, I've never seen John McGinn have a bad game, and Tierney have a bad game, and Robertson. I mean, you're right in saying that Scotland are on the cusp of something good.
I think too as well, when you look at some of the youngsters coming through the under-21s, like your Billy Gilmores, your Lewis Fergusons, you kind of got another crop as well that's pushing those ones on kind of hopefully get to their first tournament since yourself in '98.
Aye, well, I think so. I mean, as I say, I'm the luckiest guy in football because I was at 5 tournaments on the staff with Scotland. You know, I was at 3 World Cups, and then we've only ever been to 2 European Championships. I couldn't believe that, and it was we went '92 to Sweden and '96 to England. And I was the assistant in '92, and I was the manager in '96. So the only 2 we've been at, I was there, and 3 World Cups in a row. Well, not in a row. Mexico '86, then Italy '90, and then we didn't get to America in '94. Unfortunately, we got to France in '98. So to go to 5 tournaments in 12 years, and now we've been another 20 odd years, or just over 20 years, and we've not been at one. It's distressing actually to think, and I think we've been desperately unlucky. But the quality of players that are available now they are not as good as the ones I had. I had far better players than Gordon Strachan or Alec McCoy, other Scotland managers since I had the job. The people are saying to me, Gordon's not good enough, Alec McCoy. I says, no, it's nothing to do, in my opinion, with the manager. They're good managers. They haven't got the players, and the players that they've got are not playing at the highest level. I mean, I had 3 from the champion team of England. Now, you wouldn't believe Blackburn Rovers won the championship, and we had 3 players, and that was Big Henry, Kevin Gallagher, and Billy McKinlay. And they're the champions of England. And then before that, we had 3 from Manchester United. We had Leighton, we had McClair, and we had Strachan from Manchester United. So now you're looking at the Scottish team and you're saying, where are they getting them from? They're getting them from Bournemouth and Derby County, and they're not taking them from weird, Charlie Nicholas from Arsenal. I mean, these were top teams, and Liverpool were providing players in my time with the Scottish team, Steve Nicol and Souness and Kerry, of course, from Liverpool. The top teams in England. Now you look at the Scottish team now, they're not recruiting for the top teams in England.
You're lucky if it's the top division in some cases. I mean,
You're
it's
right.
a bit better now, but going back maybe 5, 6, 10 years, you were getting a lot of guys from League 1, League 2 in England that were getting caps for Scotland.
Aye, you're absolutely right. It doesn't mean he's a bad player because he's in League 1, 2, but he's not playing at the highest level. And these teams are not playing in Europe. Now, I mean, when you think of the opportunity I had to pick Celtic players and Celtic get to a final in Seville in Europe, now these guys get fantastic experience. And I could put a guy like Tosh McKinlay in the Scottish team, and he's played in Europe with Celtic, and he's top class. Now, when you look at it now, the managers that have followed me have been unlucky in that they've had to go to the lower leagues of England. You're dead right saying that. And they're not. If somebody says, who's the champion team of England? Man City, any Scottish player? No. Who's the next best team? Even Manchester United now, And Liverpool have won it there. They've got Robertson, which is good and a great experience for him. But he would have been, whatever club he'd gone to, he'd have been outstanding. But we're not as lucky as they were when I was the luckiest guy alive, because I had great quality to choose. So I could leave Billy McKinlay, a champion of England, out of my team, because I was putting McAllister in, who's won 3 tournaments in 1 season when he was at Liverpool at the end of his career. He's won the English League with Leeds United. And then you've got another one I had was Paul Lambert, won the European Champions League with Dortmund. So, I mean, you're looking at your midfield and you've got Lambert and you've got Collins, Monaco, top team in France, beat Manchester United home and away in Europe, and John's playing for them. So you're talking about players playing at a far higher level than the Scottish players are playing just now. Sorry, I get kind of carried away.
No, that's probably that.
Even another one that kind of went under the radar a little bit was Brian O'Neill when he was out at Wolfsburg.
Yes, aye. Well, Brian was at Wolfsburg, and I know Brian so well. I actually signed him for Preston North End, and they loved him at Preston North End. And he still lives down there at Lytham because they liked him and he liked it down there. But he was the player of the year at Derby County. Brian O'Neill and Wolfsburg, and I phoned Jim Smith, the manager of Derby. I said, "You got Brian? How's he doing?" Because I knew him from the under-21s. He says, "Outstanding," and everywhere Brian's been, he's been outstanding, and not only a smashing player, a great guy. All the great guys are the best players, but Brian O'Neill was, and you've given a very good example of a top-class young player who became a top-class senior player and is still a top-class guy, Brian O'Neill.
I think one of the ones, obviously, in terms of talent today, probably I think you especially like him, James. You know I'm going to talk about the generational talent, like Billy Gilmore. Like today, as we record this, he's just went under the knife for being told at least he's having knee surgery that keeps him out for 3 or 4 months. Like, do you then? I mean, when are these Scotland games meant to be played? October.
Yeah, well, but you mentioned Billy Gilmore. It's amazing. I've only seen him playing in the flesh once, and it was the Rangers youth against Aberdeen. Mm-hmm. And, it was so outstanding. And then next thing he's away to Chelsea. Now, I've never seen him playing for Chelsea. I've never been at a Chelsea game because I'm at every Aberdeen game still. Although I was on the board, I'm off the board, I'm now the club ambassador. So, it's kind of incumbent upon you to be at every match, home and away. So I go to every, and I think I've missed one Aberdeen game in the last, since I went as a manager and then I was a director. Now, therefore, I've seen every opposing team as well. But Billy didn't play in the first team against Aberdeen for Rangers. But he played in the youth, the development team, I think they were called it. And they looked, and of course, I've got a lot of contacts at Ibrox, and they tell me he is outstanding. And you can see it. And he's so young. So it'll be brilliant if he comes through.
Yeah, we've got Mr. Ibrox youth updates with us, so you'll be able to fill us in a bit more, won't you?
Who is?
Mr. Ibrox youth updates here, the roving Rangers news reporter.
All right.
I'm a huge fan of Billy's. I think he can go absolutely as far as he wants. I've seen a lot of him at Rangers with the 20s before he moved to Chelsea. And I think he's got everything to be the best player to come out of this country in generations. He's such an intelligent, clever player.
Well, that'd be great. I take your word for that because I haven't seen enough of him, but I've watched him on TV recently when he comes on for Chelsea. To play at that level, at that age, is quite exceptional. And, and to hear the manager, he obviously, his manager's played at the highest level too, and he's complimenting him and selecting him. It tells you the quality, the calibre of the boy. So, I mean, we had it. I've got to say, we played England in a playoff game at Wembley, and the best Scotland player was the youngest on the pitch, and he was a Rangers player at the time, and that was Barry Ferguson. Barry Ferguson was 20 years of age when we went down and beat England at Wembley, and they had Scholes and Ince and these guys about their midfield, and Barry Ferguson ran the game. I mean, really, the ball, he was never off the ball, and the ball, everything went through him, and they couldn't, or they didn't feel disposed to even mark him, and so he was magnificent. Now, I have a feeling that Gilmore's not unlike that. He's got that kind of capability. So
no, very much so.
If that's the case, you know better than I do. You've obviously seen about it more than that, but if that's the case, we're delighted, aren't we?
Definitely. I mean, I think Ferguson at that time, so that kind of window from around about 2000 to 2002, it was just incredible. I remember Rangers playing in Europe, and he was outshining Yuri Zorkayev, who'd won the World Cup a couple of years earlier. He was making Lothar Matthäus look like an amateur, and it was just incredible. This was a young Scottish guy at 21, 22 years old.
Yeah, nice lad. He's doing his Kelty Hearts at the moment, but he and his nephew's playing for Aberdeen very well, Lewis Ferguson, So, but one of the best performances I've seen from a young Scottish player was we put Burchell too into the Scotland team, and he was quite bright for a game or two. But in terms of youth, the young Barry Ferguson was so good in an environment there, a hostile environment at Wembley against England. So if Billy Gilmour's like that, we've got a player. But we have got, McGregor and McGinn are smashing midfield players at the moment for Scotland. And I do genuinely think that we've got. I don't see why we can't play one of these two at right back, Robertson or Tierney, and the other one at left back. But that's up to the manager.
I suppose the thing.
What
is it?
I was just going to say to you that there's a feeling that if he's right-footed, he can't play left back, or if he's left back, if he's left-footed, he can't play right back. Well, the best left backs I can think of for Scotland over the years have been right-footed. And if I can go way back, you guys are too young. But Rangers captain and best when I was a young boy was Eric Caldo, and he was a left back of Rangers, and he was right-footed. Then Tommy Gemmell was the Celtic left back, and he was right-footed. And then we moved forward to the D United when they were in the European final. Maurice Malpass was a left back, and he was right-footed. And when you think of them, these are the three best historically anyway, best fullbacks. And we played. I had Christian Daly sometimes playing on the left back. He was right-footed, but he was very comfortable. So I don't see why you need to be left-footed to be left back. And therefore, the corollary is true. You don't need to be right-footed to be right back. So I would have thought that one or other, Tierney or Robertson, could surely play the other side of the pitch comfortably. Not as maybe as comfortably, but successfully.
It's just like, I suppose it's treading the fine line of getting a system that works and also getting as many as your best players in. And because you don't really want Ash, because Tierney's after, I know he's had a lot of injury problems in the last year, but now he, as we record this, and his latest match got man of the match and stuff, you need these type of guys somewhere or not.
That's a very good point you made there. You want your best players on the pitch. And I've got to say that's why I changed the system when I was with the Scottish team. Because I changed it to a 3-5-2 because we had an abundance of good central midfield players. And to get them all in the team, to get more, if you play 4-4-2, that was the house style for most teams, you've only got two central midfield players. But we had McAllister, we had Lambert, we had Collins, we had Stuart McCall. We wanted three of them in the team. Now, if you want them all in the team actually, if you're playing a 4-4-2, you've only got two central midfield players, and you're struggling because you have to leave two very good players out, or you have to change their position. But if you play 3-5-2, you've got three central midfield players in that system. So we favoured that system when I had the job, and with a back three, and the back three was very secure. Calderwood, Henry, and Boyd, and they were unbeatable, and I really mean that. And with the two best goalkeepers in the business to choose from, we had Leighton and Gorham. I mean, and three. We played the qualifying. Sounds a bit boastful, but it's factual. We played to qualify for Euro '96. We played 10 qualifying games, and we lost 3 goals in the 10 games. Then to qualify for the World Cup in 1998, we played 10 qualifying games. We lost 3 goals. I mean, it's quite incredible. I'm not trying to be boastful. I'm trying to just say to you that the quality of the players we had, a back three, Calderwood, Henry and Boyd, were unbeatable. I'm telling you. They had every attribute that you would want with your players. And the goalkeeping, Leighton, 91 caps, 45 clean sheets. I mean, that is, and Gorham, I dropped Leighton for the European finals down in England, and I played Gorham because Gorham, Tommy Burns, the late Tommy Burns, super guy, says to me, he was the manager of Celtic, he says, Gorham broke my heart. He won the championship for England, for the Rangers. He says, Gorham was exceptional. And the way Tommy described it, he says, when you shoot at Gorham, the ball's twice the size. He catches it.
I will argue with anyone that there was a spell in the mid-90s where Andy Gorham was the best goalkeeper on earth. I think he was that good, and he was a wee short guy with bad knees, which just made it all the more incredible.
Exactly. Oh, he was fantastic. Well, I had to drop Jim Leighton. We played most of the qualification games, and we'd only lost 3 at Golden 10 game, and I put Gorham in. And Jim was shattered, when I said to him, we were down in England in Euro 96, and I said to him, you're not playing in the first game. Oh, he's a super guy, Jim Leighton, incidentally, but he took it, he was heartbroken, I could tell. And I learned something that we were playing England on a Monday. Beg your pardon, we were playing the first game against Holland on the Monday, and England were playing on the Saturday against Switzerland in Euro 96. And we were watching the game on the television, the England game from Wembley. Now, we're playing at Villa Park against Holland. And after the England game, I went to see Jim Leighton. And I said to him, Jim, just to let you know, this is Saturday. On Monday, I'm playing Andy Gorham. Oh, well, he's a lovely guy, Leighton, but his head was down. He says, oh, shattered. I said, well, Jim, it's just a value judgment. I've made the judgment because I've been watching Gorham in the last 2 or 3 months of the season. He's unbeatable. And the boy's twice his size. Well, anyway, Gorham had a clean sheet against Fulham. And Leighton said to me afterwards, this is the kind of guy Jim Leighton is. He says, I want to say to you that I'll obviously not get a game against England because Andy's had a clean sheet. I said, no, you're not. We'll be keeping the same goalkeeper. He says, can I thank you? I says, thank me. I said, I thought you were so hurt and disappointed. He says, no, I want to thank you for telling me in advance that I wasn't playing. If you told me the morning of the game, I'd have been so shattered. I wouldn't even been able to be on the bench. My mind would. And also it helped me to phone my family and say to my wife and my kids, hey, I'm not playing. You don't need to come down from Aberdeen to the game. Come if you want. But he said, now I learned that if you're dropping a senior player, give him maximum warning so that you don't hit him with it the day of the game. And and it was just that incident with Jim Leighton told me. But I don't want to digress, but I mentioned Tommy Burns, and I've got to tell you both a story about Tommy Burns.
And you will.
Can I tell you?
Oh,
yeah, absolutely.
We had a B international match when I had the A team, and it was against Wales in Wales, and we were playing a friendly with Wales, and we had a B game the same night. So we picked a B team. I needed a manager, for the B team. So Tommy Burns was the manager of Kilmarnock, and I was staying in Ayr at the time. So I said, I would love Tommy to I met him quite a bit in the coaching courses and things, see if he would take the B team. So I drive into Rugby Park in the morning, and Tommy's in the car park. He's in his car, and his head's down. And I drew my car up alongside him, and he gave me a wave. As much, I'll be with you in a minute, kind of thing, So it 2 or 3 minutes, and then he got out and he waved me, and I went in. And he said, I'm sorry. And I thought this was really respectful. He said, I'm sorry I kept you there, Craig. I said, what is it? He says, I said, your problem? He says, no, I always just read a wee bit of the Bible before I go into my work. And I thought, good on you, Tommy, So he was in his car, and he was reading. So I got in and speak to him. I said, Tom, would you take the B team? Oh, I'd be honoured to take the D team. I'll just need to ask my chairman, but I'm sure he'll let me. I said, that's very good. Well, we can pick the team together because I'm out watching them. And these are guys that do. So we picked a team, and he took the team to Wales. I'll hurry up with the story. And I can't even remember the result. But he phoned me after the game, and I said, any players for us for the first team, Tom? He said, you've got one. You've got to put him in the first team. And I'm going to surprise you. He played midfield for his club, and we started in midfield for the first half. And I moved him up front in the second half. And if ever I saw a striker that'll transform your team, he says, he'll do it. And I says, who are you talking about? He says, Don Hutchison. He says, Don Hutchison had a good game in the first half. And I thought, he looks as if he could be a striker. I put him up. And he says, he was outstanding in the second half. and he headed every ball. He held it in, he shot for goal. Brilliant. Now, my two best results for Scotland were an away win in Germany. We beat Germany 1-0. Who scored the goal? Don Hutchison. And it would never have been up front. We beat England at Wembley in the playoff. Who scored the goal? Don Hutchison. Now, I would never have played Don Hutchison up front if it hadn't been for the advice that I got from Tommy Burns, the late Tommy, super guy. And he said, put him up front. He says, he's got everything that you would want as a striker. And when we played England, and Southgate was at centre half, he was rough. He roughed him up. Southgate's a super player, but he's a calm player, and he doesn't like a striker that like big Don, who was battered into him, and he battered into him all right, and he scored the header at Wembley. So, and that was thanks to the late great Tommy Burns.
What's funny won't go by and all that.
Well, yeah, well, I was fortunate with Tommy. They had it at Celtic Park. I don't know if they still have it. They had a Burns supper. And it was around. It was a combined Rabbie Burns, Tommy Burns supper, the Burns supper. So I was honoured. I was asked to speak at it one year, and it was quite one of the. You go to many dinners, but it was one of the dinners I so much enjoyed. The tie-up between Tommy Burns and Rabbie Burns. Of course, Tommy was a wonderful singer. He would sing. What was it? He sang "Mike the Knife."
Mike the Knife, yeah.
And Mccoy sang the rap. Mccoy did the rap when we were away with the Scottish team, right? Well, the singing competition, and it was always the final was usually Mccoy against Burns, and the rap was against Mike the Knife, and it was fabulous, Tommy. So it's a shame to speak about this. Then I was doing one of these broadcasts, and recently, and it was for the North American coaches.
Mm-hmm.
Right, okay.
It was actually coming from Canada. Actually, it came from Toronto, and the guy interviewed one of the guys. Three of them interviewing me. One of them was Tommy's son,
right?
Johnny Burns.
Do you know that beforehand, or did you beforehand that's who was going to be interviewing you?
Sorry, I didn't hear you, sir.
Did you know beforehand that's who was speaking?
No, I didn't know. I didn't know beforehand that he was interviewing me. I thought it was just John Burns, who was based in Toronto and runs a team there. And they were all coaches over there. We're talking about coaching things, and John Burns. And when it finished, I still didn't know. Answer these questions. And then one of the guys there, Colin Miller, who used to play for Dunfermline, and he was manager at Hamilton for a while, and played for Rangers. Colin Miller was I think he's the assistant manager of the Canadian national team. Mm-hmm. Colin phoned me and said, no, that was Tommy Burns' son. I said, no. So I sent him an email afterwards saying, I'm very sorry. I don't know. I'm glad I told good things about Tommy, but nobody could do other than that because he was such an exceptional guy. But that was his son, who's apparently, and of course I should have, when I looked at his team, it's called the Toronto Celtic.
It's not subtle, is it?
No, the name Burns in Toronto Celtic, I thought, no, I should have known.
That's what a coincidence.
Sorry?
What a coincidence that is. Like that
more than a coincidence. This is only a fortnight ago. I was on the Zoom to the coaches over there.
Have you spoke to him since, I'm assuming?
Pardon?
Have you spoke to him since, I'm assuming?
I'm sorry,
have you spoke to him since?
No, I've not spoken to him. I've emailed back.
Emailed him? Yeah. Not too bad. Just
a gentleman. And the other lads told me, he's such a nice guy, and I said, well, that's understandable, because he's just like his father. He's not a player like his father, apparently, but he's a nice guy.
I like how in that conversation, James, your face only lights up when Alan Acosta is mentioned.
No, not at all. No, not at all. I'll have a good Tom Burns story.
I can give you a few McCoy stories. I could do you a whole night in McCoy stories. If I go to a dinner and I say to them, if you mention McCoy, I'll talk. I've got a story for half an hour You know, I could go for half an hour on McCoy stories.
I know. Have you got a favourite McCoy story then?
I have a few favourites. You know, it depends how much time I've got.
As much as you want.
Much as you want.
Well, you know, I'll give you one that the first time I met McCoy, I had him in the under-21 team. We're playing Switzerland, and it was a small village. I can't even remember where it was. And there was a line up before the game, and McCoy will only be 19 or 20, and he's lined up, and I said to him, sing the anthem, and if you don't know the words, make your mouth go anyway, you know. And I panicked when I saw the team, and the team all had a present for us, the Swiss team. It was a Swiss doll. We were all standing with a Swiss doll. It was in the Perspex box. And of course, we're Scotland. What have we got for them? Nothing. So I said to the physio, the physio was the Aberdeen physio, Davy Wiley. I says, Davy, in the dressing room, we can't take a doll from them and give them nothing. He says, what will I get? I said, anything. We need 16. There was 16. There was 5 subs. He says, oh, I don't know. I said, if you to bring a number of towel out, we'll give them a towel and we'll drip dry, you know. So he went in and he came out, and it was these wee car swinging things, SFA pennant, just a pennant like that. Well, it's not a fair exchange, but so he gave all our team a pennant. So the anthems, and after the anthems, they exchanged the gifts. So it's their kick-off, and I had an instruction that every team I had, if it's their kick-off. So this is before people talk about pressing. I said, if they get 3 passes before you whack them, we're not doing our job. So we're ready. There's 2 strikers, McCoy and Gallagher, are like that, and it's their kick-off, and we're ready. And McCoy starts walking along the halfway line towards me, and he's shouting to me, boss, I says, defend the kick-off, Christie, defend it. And I was getting quite ratty because nearly off the pitch. I said, what's your problem? I didn't get a doll. He says, I didn't get a doll. But you know, after the exchange of presents, he was left without the doll. That's one. But maybe the best McCoy story. Oh, no, there are so many. But they came and they hugged me when they scored the goal against Switzerland in Euro '96, and he jumped in me and he hugged me. And the press said to me afterwards, why did McCoy hug you? I says, what did he say? I said, he didn't come to hug me. He came to and he asked me, why was I not on from the start in the other games? I said, he was phoning, he wasn't on from the start. He was not congratulated. But the other wee thing, we were playing in the World Cup against, before the World Cup, we played a friendly against France in St Etienne. Now that French team went on and won the World Cup, but they didn't have to qualify, so they were looking for friendly matches. So they offered Scotland big money to go to play them. So we went over to St Etienne, and McCoy was on the bench. And I'll never forget this because we were playing very well, I thought. And I said before the game, I'll give them a team, I says, now listen, I didn't know this was the team that was going to win the World Cup. I said, but see, there's a guy number 10. I said to Burley, if that number 10 Zidane crosses a halfway line with a ball and you don't whack him, you'll be substituted, you'll be sitting with me. And big Craig Burley, if he come up, you know, I'll sort him. Well, 2 minutes into the game, right in front of us, Zidane get the ball. Well, I have never seen a tackle like it. Burley came in and it was an assault. Oof. And Zidane went right up there and down. And of course, I said to my colleague Alec Miller was on the bench with me, I says, Alec, he's off. Now, the wee referee was from Spain, and I think because it was a friendly, I think he called him over and he's speaking good English to Burley. You were late, number 8. And Burley's I got as early as I could, ref. He says, but he says, I am going to give you a yellow card if you do that again. So I thought, thank goodness. So McCoy shouts on, oh, Burley, he's on the bench, McCoy's. Burley, one more tackle like that, pal, you'll be joining your teeth in the dressing room. But then it was 1-0 for France at half-time. And just after half-time, I said to McCoy, warm up, Ali, get warmed up. Get warmed up. And of course, only Ali McCoy could say it, and it wasn't cheeky. You know, He says, not before time. I said, well, get warmed up. And while he's warming up, Jury, who I was going to take off, Jury scored the best goal I think I've seen Scotland score in my time. What a goal it was, from just outside the box, right into the French top corner. And I'm taking him off. So I'm saying to myself, wait a minute. When a guy has scored a goal, he's full of confidence. And the next time he shoots, the goal's twice the size. So I changed my mind. I says, Christie, and he's warming up. I says, we'll leave it just now. And he looked at me. He says, now only Mccoy could get away with this. He looked at me. He says, Jury. He says, Jury, 1 goal in 6 years. He says, 1 goal in 6 years? And you're not putting me on. He says, prolific. Wasn't he prolific? But, he said it in such a humorous. He couldn't be angry with Mccoy, so he sat down. Another one I like about Mccoy is, as I said, I could do a half an hour. He broke his leg, the worst leg break I've seen in Portugal, playing for Scotland. And Andy Rogers was the manager, and Andy said, would you go to the hospital with him? Because he'll have to stay overnight. He'll not manage the flight back. And somebody need to stay with him. I said, I'll go with him then. So I go in this ambulance, and we get into this big hospital in Lisbon, and he's getting wheeled in. And he's still in his Scotland jersey. And the porter's saying, I saw you play, your number, Mccoy. Yeah. He says, you'll be all right in this hospital. And Mccoy says, why is that? And McCoy's got so much morphine in him. He's actually smiling. And the bone is sticking through his stocking. I'm telling you, it's the worst leg break I've seen. And he's smiling away, and the guy says, you'll be all right in this hospital. Number 9, McCoy. He says, why is that? He says, because we have English-speaking doctors in this hospital. McCoy says, that's great. We've got none of them in Scotland. He's always got a line. So.
See, to be fair, like Alan McCoy's I've never spoke to him. I don't know if you have, James, but he always, from both sides of, I know he's obviously synonymous with Rangers, but from both Rangers, Celtic, Motherwell, Dundee United, everybody really appreciates that Alan McCoy is just one of football's good guys, I think.
He's the nicest man in football.
He's super. If you can get him, it's hard to get because he's got so many commitments. But I've known him for all these years and gone very well with him. But as I say, these are only some of the stories that I can tell. Some I can't tell.
We'll maybe try and source him at one point and get him to say his own stories that we can edit in. But
there was a good one. There was a good one. Sorry, I'll remember this one against Celtic when right in front of him, he was. By this time, he was the coach of Rangers, the manager, and he's standing there playing Celtic. And right in front of him, there was a 50-50 challenge. Davy Weir into a challenge with Van Hooijdonk. And it was a vicious challenge. So the two of them clashed, and the referee called them over. And he said to Davy Weir, you will. No, he said to Van Hooijdonk, your name. I'm going to give you a yellow card. Now, it's 1-0 for Celtic at the time. I'm going to give you a yellow card. So the big boy says, Pierre Van Hooijdonk. And he says it slowly like that. And McCoy says, time wasting. Give him another, get him off. Only McCoy would say a thing like that. Time wasting, get him off. Pierre Van Hooijdonk. Sorry, I'm
No, not at all.
Naive stories.
You're allowed to express yourself in your own stories and stuff. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I'm duty bound to ask you about the World Cup. Obviously, as a young Scottish man, I don't know what that is. But have you got sort of like a favourite story or a story that sums up that campaign for you?
Well, there's I think it's on YouTube. There's a thing, Craig Brown's World Cup Diary, which is, people have said to me, well, watch that. And there's a lot of good stuff, good stories, because it was flying the wall camera in the hotel and in the dressing room and all that. But we had a great experience. We went over to America before the World Cup to prepare, and Rod Stewart joined us and joined us training, and he invited us to his concert. He had a concert in Madison Square Gardens, and we were staying in New Jersey, preparing at a place called Pingree School, which was a lovely pitch and everything we had, and he invited us to his show, and he's on the stage, and there's 20,000 in there, or 17,000, I'm exaggerating, 17,000 there, and so many thousand outside. Rod Stewart in America is so popular, and the thing that impresses everyone, impressed us about him, was it's not just the teeny boppers, the teenage girls, grannies to kids, the whole range of ages are there. They love Rod Stewart in America, and so he invited us, and we went there, and he invited the lads up onto the stage, and up they went, and one or two sang with him, and he did the whole second part of his show in a Scotland strip. He put a jersey on, and he got, you can imagine Mccoy and Billy McKinley and who else, wee John Spencer, guys like that, and they loved it. And Rod took part in the training sessions that we had, and pardon me, he was a good player. He was a better player than you would ever imagine, but Rod was really keen in his football. So when you go to a World Cup, the experiences that you get are exceptional. We went over there to prepare, then we came back over to France. We stayed down in Provence, in a lovely place down there, and moved up to play the first game against Brazil, who were the world champions. You couldn't get a harder game, the opening game of the World Cup. And I think it's the most attended or most watched opening game of a World Cup. And I don't know why, because I think the glamour of Brazil and France, it was there. So it's an experience in 1998 that everybody that's been, all the players and even the fans that have been there, say that was the best fortnight of my life over there in France, watching that World Cup. Well, we were unfortunate, we lost the game with an own goal. And then the next game we drew the game with Norway, and then we lost the third game. And I've got to fight my corner here, because I said to you, we lost only 3 goals in 10 qualifying games, and when we got there, Brazil scored 2. Now they're the best team in the world champions, which was disappointing, and one was an own goal. It was unfortunate. But the third game, we drew the game with Norway. Now the third game was Morocco, and Morocco won 3-0. And I always say this to fight my corner, that all the stats in that game, every statistic, favoured Scotland. We had more possession, and we played the last half hour with 10 men because Craig Burley got sent off. So we had more possession than they had. We had more corner kicks than they had. We had more shots on goal and more shots on target. I mean, every stat favoured Scotland, and yet it just shows you that, the statistics don't matter. Really, it's the result that matters, because if it was stats. Now, the other thing, I was boasting about the back 3 that we had, Calderwood, Henry and Boyd. What really scuppered us in that game against Morocco, the last game in the World Cup, was that Calderwood got injured in his shoulder and couldn't play. He got dislocated there. He couldn't play in the game, the last game. So we really were a man short in a key position in the defence. So we had to change the defensive setup. We made it a 4-4-2. But I don't think we played badly. We played quite well, and yet we lost 3-0. So I always get pelters for that. That's the biggest defeat I had with the Scottish team, was to lose that game in the World Cup, and it was a high-profile game. But everything favoured us, and we just couldn't score. And they got 3 very good couple of breakaways, but even with 10 men in the last half hour, when Burley gets sent off, Craig Burley sent off for tackle from behind, it wasn't that bad a tackle, but any tackle from behind, you were off. Yeah. So off he went, and we lost the game. So that's not maybe what you wanted to hear, but I'm just trying to fight my corner and defend the bad result that we had in the final game, which was uncharacteristic because we didn't usually lose 3 goals. It took a whole qualification campaign to lose 3 goals, and we did it in one game, like 1 hour of the game.
I wonder, like with hindsight, like obviously I wasn't about back then, but whether the Scotland support at that time would have appreciated that game a lot more, because obviously was that the last game obviously before Scotland's playing the World Cup.
We got a lot of criticism after the game, the same old story and all that kind of thing. But you couldn't say it at the time. You can maybe say it now. You could say at least we were there, But I always believed that you never be boastful. You underplay your hand. You always say we'll do our best. You never say we're going to do this or we're going to do that. And therefore, with hindsight, I don't think it would have been a different selection. I don't think I would have done anything differently. As I said in that video that they've made, the diary thing that's in the YouTube. So, I mean, it was just one of those times we were beaten, and you've got to just hold up your hand and say we were beaten. I honestly don't think they were a better team, although they were the African champions, Morocco. Now, Africa is a huge country, a huge area, and because Morocco wasn't fashionable, if it had been maybe Nigeria or Ghana or South Africa or somebody had beaten us, it wouldn't have sounded so bad. But Morocco, I never heard of them, and yet they've some very, very good players, and they were the champions of. To get there, they had to be the African champions. So, but we loved the tournament, and people that I meet say that was the best couple of weeks of my life over in France at the World Cup, and I thought we played with, I would say, good credit. Not wonderful, but we weren't outplayed by Brazil, certainly not by Norway, and certainly not by Morocco. But hopefully the next time.
One day we'll be back-ish.
I hope so.
Well, if it's just as well, it's not any time soon, to be fair, because we wouldn't be going, we'd just be watching to the house.
Sorry, I'm not. Maybe it's my ears.
No, you're fine. It's just we're lucky it's not like the Euros this year. It's obviously been canned with the COVID. At least when's the next World Cup? 2020.
2022 is supposed to be.
2022, yeah. It's every 4 years for the World Cup.
So you'll get back to back. You'll get 2021 for the Euros and then 2022 straight for the World Cup in the winter.
Yeah. I think they're going to do that. Yeah, it'd be great to get there, and I've been desperate to go as a supporter. I've been at World Cups working for television, but we've not been there, and it's not the same with South Scotland there. I was very lucky to get to other World Cups and to do the commentary, but it's definitely not the same tournament without Scotland being there. No, if you're Scottish.
Definitely not. It's a new tournament now that Scotland haven't been there for almost 2 decades, but we digress. Obviously, after your Scotland spell, you went down. You went down south for a bit after Scotland. How did you sort of find the EFL?
Well, I retired when I finished with Scotland. I retired, and I thought I was 62 at the time, and I thought that'll do me. And I was happy. I just retired, and I was just going to watch football. And then I was at a dinner in Glasgow, and this guy came to me and said, "My name's Tony Scholes. I'm the chief executive of Preston North End. Would you be interested in getting back into management?" And I said, "Well, I hadn't thought about it, to be honest. I thought I'm finished because you can't get better than the national team." But when he said Preston, I said, "Oh, we've had David Moyes, and if you phone David, he'll tell you about us, and he's gone to Everton, and we're looking for a manager, and we'd be interested in meeting you." So I phoned Big Davy Moyes and said, "Davy, what is a super club, great football club, Preston, and nice people." So he said, "They asked me about you," and I gave a good mention, So I went down and met the chairman and the guy Tony Scholes, who is now incidentally the chief executive of Stoke City, and he's got Michael O'Neill as his manager now. But I went down and I met them, and I was happy to go to Preston, and I left Preston. But then I was asked to go down to Fulham to work with Chris Coleman, which I did, and that was a good. That was a sort of how would you call it, consultancy. And then I had Billy Davis, did well at Preston, and he went to Derby County, and I went to Derby with Billy as I think you would call me nowadays the director of football, but they called it football consultant, which was a great title.
That's pretty good, eh?
You didn't get the blame, you were, and the manager consults you if you want. So I had a great spell in England because I was football consultant at Derby, and we won the playoff match to get into the Premier League. We beat West Bromwich. Stephen Pearson, a Motherwell laddie, Celtic. Stephen scored the only goal, 1-0, and we get into the Premier League. So, but then Billy he had an issue with the chairman at Derby. So when Billy left, Billy had taken me. I went as well. So it was a very good experience in England with 3 very good clubs: Preston, Fulham, and Derby. And then when Billy fell out with Derby and left, I out of loyalty went with him. I said, I'm going, and the chairman said, I don't want you to go. I said, I'm going. Billy brought me. I'm leaving with Billy. So I left with Billy, and I was out the game for, I don't know, another year, I think. Again, retired. And then I get the call from Bill Dickey at Motherwell.
Retirement's just not for you.
Sorry?
Retirement's just not for you at that stage.
No, well, not really, no, because I was retired. I was content. But Bill Dickey phoned in, and he said, would you help us out for a wee while? Because we've no manager. The manager they had a bad spell, and they had let him go. And with no manager, could you take the team for a wee while? I know your feelings for Motherwell. I said, delighted. And of course, Archie Knox was available as well. So Archie and I went to Motherwell, and it was just to help out for a few games, and then. We went on to a very good run, and they asked us to stay, so we stayed. But we wouldn't sign. I wouldn't sign a contract at Motherwell because nothing to do with money. It was just to do with the fact that they gave me a contract, and I had full control of everything from the under 20 upwards. I wasn't. I had control over the under 20 team. And they had a very good under 20 coach who's now the assistant at Cove called Gordon Young. And Gordon was excellent. And I got on very well with him. But I thought, I'm not going to be the manager of this football club if I've not got control over the whole club. So I said, I'm not signing a contract, but I'll work. I like working for Motherwell. I loved it. And I've got to say we were very, very successful. If you look at the websites, the one that there's one called Football Stats. I don't know if you follow that.
No, I know what you're talking about.
The Football Stats. Well, Archie and I have got the best record, I think. And we get into Europe, and in terms of win, loses, and draw. How they do the stats. Well, at Motherwell ours are very good.
See, just on your Motherwell spell, obviously, just on your Motherwell spell, obviously you took over from the guy you were talking about. I've mentioned him.
Jim Gannon.
Aye, because we recorded with this will be out after we recorded with Chris Humphrey, who I know you work with at Motherwell, and he just says the club, the senior players especially at the club, he had a great eye for a player, Jim Gannon, so you probably needed a decent squad off him, but the relationship between management and player had just completely gone at that point.
Well, what happened was, I think, anyway, I found that when we went to Motherwell, the senior players were in the reserves. They were out of the team. Now, it was easy to make Motherwell better because Stevie Hamill, Lasley, Chris Humphrey, McCragan, they were all out of the team. the simple thing to do was, bring back the boys that have been bombed and show a bit of faith in them. Now, it was a great team we had. It was a super team at Motherwell, and I was happy there. But I didn't sign the contract because I hadn't full control over the football matters. That was the only reason. And then when Aberdeen came, and Archie Knox was with me, and Archie had been at Aberdeen, and Archie saying, "Well, go to Aberdeen, it's a bigger club, it's a better club." I said, "Archie, their team's crap, And we'd gone up to Aberdeen and with Motherwell and beaten them 3-0, no problem. And putting young boys on to give them experience in the second half. And Motherwell, we're throwing on Jamie Murphy and Bob McCoy and Stevie Lawless, young lads, if I remember accurately, but it was an easy victory over Aberdeen with Motherwell, which tells you the gap between the two teams at the time was huge. And yet we were, when I think back, we were foolish. We left Motherwell and went to Aberdeen.
No, I can mind it. Just on your Mull stuff as well. You've obviously worked with a few players at Mull. That was sort of at a time where I just sort of started going to watch the games. And I know you obviously had Lukas Jukovic there, who was one player. But there was another striker that's been well talked about, not for particularly what he did on the park, but he had a really good song. His name was Esteban Casagolda.
Aye.
What was he like? Because he was a completely bizarre signing, and he's a bit of a myth still at Fir Park.
Aye, it wasn't the best signing, but the only thing I'll say to you is that it wasn't it didn't cost us anything. It was his agent, and I thought, we'll sign him, we'll have a look at him, and we played a couple of trial games, and he actually looked all right in the trial games. So it wasn't a costly mistake. It was a mistake signing Casagolda, but it wasn't an expensive one. You can make mistakes, and every manager does, but you don't want to make costly mistakes where the club's having to pay a big transfer fee or a big wage to the boy. We had. I got to say Jim Gannon left us with some good players. Jennings in midfield was a good player, Steve Jennings. But what he had done was I don't know whether he had fallen out with the senior players, but he had bombed some of the really good guys, Cragen and Campbell and these guys, Leslie. And it was easy to improve your team by bringing them back in. And that Motherwell team was excellent. We signed the boy Haitley. And they put him in at fullback, and so we had Haitley, we had Reynolds, we had Cragen and Hamill at fullback. That was a back four, and with the England goalkeeper that we inherited, Ruddy. Now he was excellent, and we signed, I think, the best goalkeeper in the league once we signed Darren Randolph, and he's still playing at the top level and still playing international football, Randolph. And that was, it just showed you contacts. I met Christian Daly, and Christian Daly, I said, "Any players down there?" He says, "What are you looking for?" I says, "Well, we're losing the goalies, was on loan, he's going away, have you got a goalie?" Aye, he says, "I'm at Charlton." He says, "They signed a goalkeeper. The boy that he replaced is a better goalkeeper, and he's called Darren Randolph." Honestly, he says, "I think you could get Randolph from Charlton and let him go if you can get another club." So that's how you get players. I knew Christian Daly, and he was playing for Charlton Athletic, so we signed Darren Randolph, and I think he was excellent. And then you're getting to your midfield at Motherwell with Lasley and Jennings. They were outstanding. And then we had a flyer in the one wing. We had O'Brien on one side who could run, and we had Humphrey on the other side. And then we had Big Jukovic and Sutton were the main strikers, and McHugh was about the place. Wee Lawless was about the place. I think I've probably forgotten someone there now. And if they listen to this, they'll say, "Why did you not mention me?" I'm trying to think. You're a Motherwell fan. You tell me who I've missed.
There was one that came in that was obviously high profile from time gone by. His career had sort of fell to the wayside by the time he arrived at Motherwell. But I can remember Francis Jeffers was one that came under you, and obviously the Fox in the Box stuff from when he was a young guy. Talking about Fir Park was a bit odd.
But when we left Motherwell, we were in Europe. As I said to you, we got to the playoff, which was very good in Europe, and it wasn't an easy shift to go to Iceland and to go to Scandinavia and get to a playoff place in Europe. We left Motherwell in the semi-final of the cup, and they got to the cup final that when we left. So I think, and I think we did them a turn at Motherwell, because we got them into Europe, and went away at the point when we were into the semi-final of the cup, which they won and got to the cup final with Stuart McCall. So, and Stuart's a smashing guy that came, I think, as the next manager. So I'm trying to think. There must have been a player that I've missed there in the Motherwell. Murphy came through very well.
Yeah.
Jamie Murphy, I think, and he was showing really good signs to be top class. And I think, but for his injury that he got at Rangers, he would have been top class. And Reynolds, we fancied Reynolds as a good, strong, intelligent guy, good defender, so we took him to Aberdeen, Mark Reynolds. And the boy, Hateley, went to Poland to play when he left Motherwell, and he's done very, very well in Poland.
He splits opinion in the Mull support to this day, because obviously he was a CDM when he arrived, but he primarily played at right back, and for me that I think he's played CDM pretty much everywhere else, but he played his best ball at back for Mull.
Well, we had a good midfield, we didn't need him in midfield, but we needed a right back, and he was good, and his delivery was terrific. He could deliver a pass, he could shoot a free kick, he could take a corner where you wanted it placed. He had a lot of attributes, Tom Hateley. But the Motherwell Football Club, I have a great affection for, I must admit, still. But when Aberdeen came and Archie kept nipping my head, and Alec Ferguson phoned me and said, "Don't hesitate, they want you at Aberdeen." And I think the chairman, Stuart Mill, had phoned Alec. He said, "Phone Craig and tell him to come," sort of thing. Well, Alex said, "You've got to take that chance to go up there, that." So, but I would never have moved if I'd signed a contract. And if Motherwell had really wanted us, I said to Archie, they'll never come back. Take that one sentence out of the contract. That's all they need to take out. You are in charge in football matters except the development team downwards. In other words, if Gordon Young wanted a boy in the under-20s for a cup tie, a reserve cup tie, and I wanted him, he could overrule me. That was it. It was as simple as that. So I just waited, and they've said nothing to do with money at all. Just to do with the wording of the contract, saying you weren't in charge of everything to do with football. And that's what the football manager has got to be, in charge of the lot. And it was Leanne Dempster who was the chief executive I was dealing with. And Leanne, I would have thought, should have, if she'd wanted us enough, got that changed and given us a redrafted. I said, if you redraft that and take that bit out, we'll be okay. But she didn't. Then when you're not in a contract and a club comes for you, like Aberdeen did, of course, the Motherwell fans gave me pelters.
Aye, Motherwell fans. I know at the time, what age would that have been? We 9-year-old Ben was like, "Why is he doing this?" 2 days ago he said he wasn't going anywhere news away up to Aberdeen. Wasn't too happy. But I mean, looking back on it, obviously at the time wasn't aware of it. Wasn't you weren't technically like full on Motherwell manager. You were just as you say, you were on the contract.
But believe me, I loved it at Motherwell twice. I loved it working as the assistant manager, and I loved it working as a manager at Motherwell. I really did. I thought Motherwell was a very good football club, an outstanding football club. And some of the people are still there. Alan McDonald, the kit man, is still there, and Alan Burrows. Alan Burrows was there when I was there, and he's a super guy now. So that and Bill Dickey's son, I think is it Douglas Dickey? He's on the board now. There are so many people still about the club that were there, and it's a nice atmosphere at Fir Park. I always felt that, and it was a great place to work. And I worked twice. I worked as the assistant with Willie McLean, and I worked as a manager. But It wasn't. If we'd signed a contract, there's not the slightest hope in hell of me breaking a contract. I would never have broken a contract, but I wasn't on a contract, so that's why I went to Aberdeen. And I've got to say, enjoyed it at Aberdeen as well. Good club, first class club. But the team that I inherited at Aberdeen was bottom of the league, right at the bottom. I mean, they had lost 9-0 to Celtic, and they had lost 5-0 to Hearts. That was the Aberdeen team that I inherited, and so there was a bit of work to do there. The job was keep us in the league, which we had to do with no money. You couldn't go and buy a couple of players to. I took one that I had at Motherwell that didn't turn out to Aberdeen. He was brilliant at Motherwell. You know who that is? Come on.
Who was it?
Striker.
Oh, Blackman. It was Nick Blackman.
Right.
He was on loan at Motherwell. He sort of goes under the radar during that period of players at Motherwell. He was a few of them that had came on in loan and then done all right.
Aye.
Obviously moved.
Well, Blackman was excellent at Motherwell, and when he came to Aberdeen, he couldn't score a goal. It was incredible. But nice lad, Nick Blackman, and up he came. But it seemed, I don't know, it seemed too far away from Blackburn where he came from. And I said to Archie, if we get Blackman up here, we've won a watch. In two respects. One, we've got him playing for us, and he's Motherwell's best scorer. So we're taking him away from a rival club. But we took him to Aberdeen, and he didn't make it up there. It's a shame.
No.
He's done well since he's gone down to England, though, so it must be my fault. I didn't get the best out of him at Aberdeen.
Are you sitting here with a deck
He
chair?
went for a lot of money in England twice. Nick Blackman.
No, right. Are we isolating? Yeah. Are you sitting with the...
No, not at all.
And the coconut
Sorry,
with a Motherwell chat?
No,
I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry, I keep rabbiting on, but please tell me if there's anything you want to ask, and I'll answer the question rather than say what I want to say.
No, but that's what we quite like about these podcasts, I think, is that we always just try and, I think, obviously with guys like yourself, you've done more than a few of these by this point. So it's always less about just asking direct questions and just having a conversation. That's what these podcasts are about. Sort of the last bullet point I've really got is sort of your time at Aberdeen. Obviously, the last management role, you're still associated with the club now, so I can only assume that it was a good time for you.
Yeah, well, Aberdeen, as everyone will tell you, is a very good football club. And, when I get the chance to go, and the honest truth is I didn't want to leave Motherwell, but I felt that if they had wanted me enough, or wanted us, because I was a pair with Archie and I, if they wanted us enough, they would have made sure that contract, and then they would have been able to get money for us, if we were going, you know what I mean? I would think Aberdeen, Motherwell rather, if two things, if they had thought we were good enough, which I think we were, because we put them into Europe right away, and we went in an unbeaten run. I think 11 games or something, when we to save them from relegation. They were way down. Nothing like as bad as Aberdeen, though. They went, and they had a good team potentially, but the good team wasn't in the pitch, because I think you're saying that all of the good players were bottom. They were on the bench and not getting a game. So if you say to Stevie Hamill and guys like that, and Craig and people like that, like, we need you, come on, they're good guys, these guys, and Laz and them, they'll fight for you. So we asked them to do that, and I remember first thing we got down to Kilmarnock and win 3-0. Motherwell hadn't won a game for, I think they'd lost, I don't know if they'd lost, they hadn't won in 7 games. That's why the manager got the sack. So I don't know the stats, and I never ever criticise a colleague, a previous manager. I'm not doing that. I'm just giving you the facts that we inherited. So, but I would have thought if Motherwell thought we were doing well enough to offer us a contract, And I said, well, only one wee thing in that contract is charge of the whole football operation. If they wanted it enough, they'd have changed that. And then I would never have been away to Aberdeen. But I went to Aberdeen, and it's a super football club. The chairman, Alex Ferguson, phoned me and said, he's a good man. I know him well. Got there, and you'll see that the potential of the club. Well, Alec is right. The potential's great. The support's good. But they had a very poor team. And it's taken a long time. It took us quite a long time to try to improve that team. We improved it enough to stay in the league. And the second year we were there, we were still battling to get from the very bottom where we inherited. The last game of the season to get in the top 6. Now that's poor for Aberdeen to be playing the last game to get in the top 6, and we lost the last game at Tannadice, and we didn't get in the top 6 because of that. We lost. If we'd beaten Dundee United, would have been in the, which would have been quite a remarkable transformation from the bottom into the top 6. But we still stayed in the bottom half, just below the middle after that. So then the next season we were doing okay. And again, obviously we went in Europe with Aberdeen. we won 3 semi-finals. Mm-hmm. And I was only at Aberdeen for just over 2 years in all. And we were in 3 cup semi-finals, and we got Celtic in 2 of them, which was unfortunate. And we got Hibs in another, and I'm moaning again, they got an offside winner. There was no VAR. Had there been, I think it wouldn't have been a winner, but and it was Griffiths that scored for Hibs in the semi. So we won 3 semi-finals. We did okay, and improved the Aberdeen team massively. Because when Derek came in the next season, we said to Stuart Milne, look, I think at the end of this season, we'll finish. If you don't mind, we're old men, Archie and I, and it's cold in this training ground at Mulgown in Aberdeen, and to keep warm was a problem. So he said, I don't want you to go. The chairman, he said, I want you to stay in a capacity or something. So they asked me to stay on the board, which was a very good honour. So when I retired from the football and I was involved in the recruitment, he said, do you help with the recruitment of the next manager? I said, yeah, sure. And so we got a good manager and we got Derek McInnes. And I was on the board all these years until 6 months ago when the new man came in, and he said, similar to the last one, he said they were revamping the board. There was four board members off. He says, Craig, you're one of them, unfortunately, because I'm bringing in new investment money to Aberdeen, and he didn't need to ask me. I hadn't any money because I worked for the SFA. I worked for the SFA, so I wasn't the kind of guy that was going to have millions to put into the club. So to get new investment, I think a bit of it from America, he was going to. 4 directors had to go, and again, the new owner, Dave Cormack, said to me, "I don't want you to go. I want you to stay on." And I said, "What capacity? Would you stay as the club ambassador?" So, and I said, "Yeah, that's a very good honour." So he says, "You're still at every game. You're at home and away. You're in the boardroom. You're still as before, but you're not in the board." So they're very good to me at Aberdeen. So that's the position I'm in at the moment. And I'm at every Aberdeen game, and unfortunately last week my birthday was quite well announced, so I'm trying to keep it quiet. Trying to my own thing.
I don't know if you've seen on Twitter, James, but like obviously because it was the big 8-0. I mean, you don't look a day past 40, but because it was a big one, it was like obviously you had the Scotland Twitter accounts, all the clubs you've been at, and just general Scottish football fans. It was like Craig Brown Day on Scottish football Twitter, wasn't it, James?
Aye, well, it was all over the news. And then, of course, Tam Cowan and Stuart Gosgrove had me on their programme on the BBC, and of course they're phoning in, giving the usual. They give me a hard time always, but I enjoy it and I can take it. But what I've got to say to you and to your podcast thing, that there's nobody been more lucky than I have been in terms of, imagine your hobby being your job all these years, and that's really been the case. And I love teaching. I was a teacher, but and then I was working in the College of Education. And, even coming through, you'll maybe not remember him again as a young lad, but in my school team at Bellsill, I was teaching in Bellsill. My school team was Andy Ritchie. Now Andy played for Morton and Celtic and was Scottish Player of the Year, and he was in my school team. So there's a lot of satisfaction too of seeing young players coming through. And at Clyde, I sold 6 players who all became really top players. And when you're 9 years the manager of Clyde, part-time, and Steve Archibald was the first one, he ended up at Barcelona. Pat Nevin was the next one I sold, having run rings around Motherwell in the cup replay. We Pat, when we beat Motherwell, Jock Wallace was your manager at the time. And then I had Ian Ferguson that went to Rangers via St Mirren. These guys, we made Tommy McQueen went to Aberdeen. Clyde made a lot of money, and we sold Jerry McCabe to Clyde Bank for 60,000 in those days. I mean, imagine Clyde to Clyde Bank 60,000, and that was quite normal. And Pat Nevin 90,000. Who's on Tommy McQueen 95,000. So when I think back of the young players I had at Clyde, some smashing boys, and Billy McNeil left me a great squad at Clyde, and I sold 1 or 2 of them to keep the club afloat, and we won a couple of leagues at Clyde. So it was all plain sailing. And I just get carried away thinking back and thinking how lucky I was. And I just want to let anyone that's listening to this know that if anyone is grateful for the game of football and for the time I've had, it's myself. I don't take a thing for granted. And I just respectful of every other person that's involved in the game of football. It's never been my habit to badmouth a player or a manager in any way. So, and I'm not going to start at my age.
No,
I don't want to be soft. Players mistake kindness for softness. If you're soft with players, they think if you're kind rather with players, they think you're soft. So I would not like to think any player thought I was soft, but I think they would think, well, I've got their interests at heart, and I try to treat each player as if he was my own son or my own colleague when I was younger. But never be disrespectful and never be boastful. I try not to be, maybe it sounded otherwise, but nothing to boast about. If you're Alex Ferguson with 30 odd trophies, then you have every reason to be boastful. But with me, I just did my best and we got on okay.
Brilliant. Well, and James, have you got anything to add?
No, I'm good there.
Brilliant. Well, Craig, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm pretty sure you could sit for another 24 hours just speaking about your career and stuff. Loved having you on, and would love to obviously have you on again.
Thank you. I'm sorry I maybe just went away off on a tangent too often.
No, not at all.
No.
You can get back to me anytime and I'll top it up properly.
No, not at all. Well, thanks.
But can I say that the atmosphere you engender, your question, the pair of you, excellent. I've been interviewed by everyone, and you can tell right away the atmosphere that I would like to think you would get the best out of everyone that you interview, that you speak to, because of your attitude and your manner. So I thank you for your courtesy and your lovely manner in the room.